Thank you, Professor Gaur. It's a great honor for me to be here today. I've been in touch with Professor Gaur and his initiatives for many years now. And the kind of quality that is maintained by Professor Gaur in everything that he does is something which is phenomenal. And it will be worthy of emulation by many other institutions and people who are devoted to study of policies. So, though I am today, coincidentally, I must tell you that I am in INS Rajali, and I happened to be the first commanding officer of this base. And that happened 30 years ago. And we had President Venkatraman at that time who came in and commissioned this base. And, I have been invited to be here to celebrate the 30 years of its dedication. And many of the students, as well as the faculty, would have heard of the P-8I aircraft, which has been acquired by India. You can see the photograph somewhere in the back, on my left over here. And that is the aircraft that operates. And in fact, during the standoff with China, this aircraft has played a major role in flying along the border on our side, of course, and trying to locate the enemy emissions. So this is something that really has helped us in getting a complete domain awareness, whether it is our land or over the sea. So this is the air station called INS Rajali, where I am here today. And so I consider it a rare honor to be speaking to you from this wonderful place, that has now more than a dozen P-8Is operating. It's got the helicopter training school. It's also got a surveillance squadron, and it's got a base support facility. So I thought I'll tell you briefly about this place, because it's just coincidental that I'm speaking from a place of great national strategic importance to the Indian Navy and as well as the armed forces of India. So coming to the topic per se, I'm going to talk about defense diplomacy. And of course, we look at the definitions. There are many definitions of this. Everything starts with a definition. So to make it simple, I'll give you a definition which I find it easy. Essentially, defense diplomacy is nothing but the part of national diplomacy, and that has many components to it. So you are using the defense assets that we have, the trained manpower that we have, the capacity and capability of defense forces that you have to further our national objectives. How does this happen? Let's look at some examples, because always when you look at theory, it sounds a little awkward. But when you look at examples, you'll realize how you can correlate the efforts of a nation to harness its national strategy by leveraging its defense potential, capability, and capacity. So let's take some examples. You all know that recently there was this famous Milan 22. I'm sure some of you also saw the live telecast of the 40 nations who participated in Milan, which was off Visakhapatnam Harbor. They had an evening celebration also, which showcased the capability of all the navies. How does this help, you may ask? Because the nation would have spent considerable time and money. The nations which came here would have carefully chosen the ships to showcase their potential. So when these like-minded nations come together, there are options that develop to be exercised. How does that happen? Because this grouping of people, Milan, which has been going on once in 2 years, always used to be conducted in Port Blair. It engaged. I myself participated in some of these, where we would present our papers, examine each other's potential, also see where are the areas where you can bring about synergy. Now, there is greater focus on synergizing your efforts. No country can do it alone, which is why you saw in the Indo-Pacific the emerging strategy of Quad, the quadrilateral. So if there are 4 countries there, US, Japan, Australia, and India, you are looking at examining various options. It becomes subset of defense diplomacy. Though today they have said that Quad is not a military alliance. It is not like a NATO structure. We are going to look at green energy. We are going to look at blue economy. We are going to look at vaccine diplomacy. We are going to look at Blue Dot network. So what it tells you is that the moment the units, the qualified people who are the practitioners of the art come together, there are many options that open. Yes, we know in India that it's also a way to challenge China supremacy in the West Pacific. So you saw that another defense, appendage to Quad developed. That's AUKUS. No, AUKUS specifically is a military alliance, whereas Quad, as every leader has tried to tell you, is not a military alliance. So what it does is, the moment the nations come together, that is because of Quad, at the secretary level talks, or the leader level talks, or the Milan, which I gave you as an example, which happened in Vishakhapatnam, you are providing a platform for people to come together. So there you look at technology. In fact, I've been participant in the Milan for some years earlier. We used to showcase not only just the military hardware, but we would have a separate food court where you would have Thai specialities, South Indian specialities, North Indian specialities, Bangladeshi puchkas. So all this also was a way to bring about those bondages amongst people who are operating the same medium of the sea. So this is the potential that it has when you are talking about defense diplomacy. So what are the other examples? Malabar. All of you have heard of Malabar, which has been going on for more than 25 years now. It started off with a bilateral exercise with US. And you remember in 2007, we had all the 4 countries today who are partners of Quad participating in this. But of course, due to the geopolitical developments that took place between 2007 and 2017, which is 10 years, nothing happened as far as getting all these 4 nations to work together. So Malabar, it remained an exercise between India and USA, but suddenly, with the changes in the geopolitical dimensions, you find that again, Malabar this time, initially this year, they operated off Guam, which is an area of interest, which is close to the centrality of West Pacific. And from there, they moved on to Bay of Bengal. And which is there, they looked at the ways in how to collaborate for dealing with both the conventional and unconventional threats at sea, or we call the asymmetric threats at sea. So when you talk about defense diplomacy, it is not always about defense action. It is not that you're like a NATO, you're sailing together to take on somebody. It is part of what you do in situations other than war. In the case of Navy, we call it MOOW, military operations other than war. What does this contain? It contains what's called the search and rescue. Remember in 2004, the Asian countries, the Southeast Asian countries, realized the potential of India because while we were engaged in battling the ill effects of tsunami on the east coast of India, in our islands in Port Blair and Nicobar, we also simultaneously dispatched ships to go all the way to Indonesia to help them out. We sent ships overnight to Sri Lanka to clear their harbor in Galle. So what it does is that even a peacetime activity where you are dealing with natural disaster, or you immediately were able to send aircraft all the way for helping out in the case when MH370 was missing. What it does is it brings these people together and it prepares you for drawing up contingency plans for each region, for Southeast Asia, for Southern Asia, for some other place, etc. The classic example of success of defense diplomacy is in the nature of operations that we conduct overseas. Like definitely, I also gave you examples of what we do, within our boundaries, but also about, let's say, the UN peacekeeping force. India has a wonderful name. Our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen, whoever have participated, have always been lauded for their professionalism, for the humanitarian way in which they deal with, even while they're enforcing peace in regions where they have sanctioned to enforce peace as part of the UN peacekeeping force. This is something that should make India very proud. So we need to look at some more examples because it is examples that will make you clear, but you'll always remember that Malmar is a tool. You'll always remember that we went out to help out people who are hit by tsunami. So let's give you some more. These have, of course, not a military content. I'm talking about Dosti. Dosti is a trilateral agreement that we have between the coast guards of Sri Lanka, Maldives, and India. Now, what happens is that while the nations may be hesitant to have a formation like the Quad, which has naval units, there will be no hesitation when you get the Coast Guards to act. Because Coast Guard has a benign nature of addressing issues in the search and rescue region under the exclusive economic zone. What are the tasks? The Coast Guard is the one which is equipped to deal with, emergencies, protection of fisheries, ensuring that marine pollution does not occur, offshore island defense, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, what we call HADR, a term that is increasingly used. So when three Coast Guards come together, they are able to sail together, look at the interests of fishermen, look at what's called the prevention of IUU. IUU stands for illegal, unmonitored, unregulated fishing. So these forms such as the dosti will help them to work with the fishermen, with other stakeholders, so that whatever issues we have, we all know that we have issues with Sri Lanka and fishermen. Every other day you will find that Tamil Nadu fishermen are crossing the IMBL and fishing in somebody else's territory. How do you resolve this? When you have active mechanisms such as the dosti, which are fishermen friendly, you find that perhaps certain options will come. This will become the track 2, if you want to call it, of the defense diplomacy. So the defense diplomacy is something, no, the diplomats have their jobs cut out. Remember that even during the crises, they work 24/7. You don't come to know what they are talking. Even for the recent evacuation of stranded in Ukraine, diplomats were at it throughout. And we had military aircraft airlifting them. We have had, when we evacuated people from Libya, we had ships going all the day. What happens is, we must understand that when a warship of the size of Jalashva or Vikramaditya goes to a foreign port, they're not just looking at a forward posturing or presence, which is a prerequisite for any navy, but you're also showcasing the potential of a country for indigenization, its technical capabilities. These are indirectly seen. The disciplined way in which the sailors marched on the Visakhapatnam streets, these 14 years, they leave an impression. So you are able to commit them to a particular task because you know that here is a professional, well-trained, disciplined force who can be entrusted with maintaining the credentials of a democratically elected government. Which is where there's another thing that we regularly use called aid to civil power. The aid to civil power is enshrined in all the three services. Coast Guard, of course, like I told you, does not have a military nature by constitution, but even that will go all out to ensure that the aid to civil power, people are sinking somewhere, a boy has fallen into a well, or you find that the fisherman is stuck, or during one of the cyclones, fishermen are missing. What do you do? They need not be only our own sailors or our own fishers. It could be from the neighboring countries, which is where the potential of a well-trained force comes handy in sending the right kind of message on what this nation can do for you. That is diplomacy. But diplomacy which is leveraged through a defense potential. So this differentiation must be very clear. It's not that defense diplomacy means you are replacing the regular workforce of diplomats who are distributed around the world. It's hardly that. You are complementing its effort. What do our defense attaches do? The defense attaches are working with ambassadors everywhere. What do they do? There's an important component of training. You must know that both the Army, the Navy, the Air Force also train foreign cadets. So if 14 navies have come here to participate in Milan, when they look at our standards, they are motivated to send their people for training. Today, the Indian Naval Academy, which is operating at Elimala, trains more than 800 cadets. It's one of the largest naval training establishment in the world. So there we are getting people from Sri Lanka, from Maldives, from Nigeria, from Bangladesh, from Myanmar. What happens is these people who are well trained, well looked after, go back and become ambassadors for India. That is defense diplomacy. The way you train them, I clearly remember way back about 15-20 years ago, I was in the headquarters of the Naval Command, which is responsible for training. And there is a Nigerian naval chief who came down. And this gentleman said, if I'm the Chief of Naval Staff today, I only thank Indian Navy because they are the ones who trained me to learn the tricks of how to run a ship, how to manage men, how to control them, how to train your people. He says, this is why I am the Chief of Naval Staff Nigeria today. And if I'm given a chance, I will ensure that everyone from Nigerian Navy is trained in India. So you see, it is a combined effort of showcasing what you can do, being accommodating in giving them the right kind of training, preparing them to run their own navy. You're not training them to run our navy. So all this come in the broad definition of diplomacy. You can't, put it in 3 pages and say this is defense diplomacy. Okay, so let's look at some more examples. In Maldives, what happened? Just 2-3 years ago, when the previous regime was there, they ran short of water. The desalination plant did not work. It was the Indian Air Force which immediately sent its heavy lift aircraft to go with water. After all, it's a small population. The total population is about 3 lakh and distributed all over. They're able to go to the main airfield and give them water and also help them out to get the complete desalination plants and other thing on order. You see the kind of goodwill that is generated. What did we do in 1989? Operation Cactus. Of course, it's a military operation. I'm not talking it's a diplomacy. It is direct military action which prevented mercenaries from taking over Maldives. There was Gayoom, who was the president at that time. One phone call from him, you had ships moving in and ensuring that our neighbor did not suffer at the hands of Tamil mercenaries. So Operation Cactus is an example of how, through earlier defense diplomacy, the neighbors in India had developed that confidence in the ability of the nation and therefore did not hesitate to even pick up a phone and call at that time whoever is a prime minister and say we need this help. So these are some of the components which we must remember when you are trying to analyze what diplomacy is all about. Now the new mantra today is about Sagar, security and growth for all in the region. No, see, we must remember that we do not have that kind of deep pockets that China has. They have a surplus of some $3.2 trillion. That's also coming down. But the point is that in comparison with an economy that is 5 times our size, we do not have the money that can be pumped in like China does. But slowly nations have realized that the benign nature of investment is lacking. And it's only furthering its own strategic objective, like in Abantota and Godar, in Bangladesh, in Myanmar. And so therefore, when they look at the kind of diplomatic efforts by India to reach out to complement the efforts of an duly elected government by methods such as neighborhood first, Saga, and you are willing to, extend a credit for developing their own capability. We gave a submarine in our neighborhood. We given offshore petrol vessels to Sri Lanka. Now, what it does is they have a certain amount of level of confidence when they operate these systems. They are trained to do this from our side. So this becomes part of our diplomatic overtures, which can be called roughly as diplomatic defense. I said, do not now try to say that what is the exact definition of diplomacy. The moment you try to contain the definition in 2 paragraphs, you are restricting yourself. I would go to the extent of saying it's important to look beyond the conventional definitions of diplomacy and see how we can use this to further national objectives. Because the national objectives are that in the case of India, we need to be a strong Asian country who others look up to for help, whether it is education, science and technology, providing of satellites, providing of blue economy initiatives, providing of the skill levels, skill training. All this can be done, one at the conventional level of education, science and technology, and other through military. So which is where the people who are at the helm of affairs in MEA, as well as the Ministry of Defense, and at the top levels in the PMO, are working together to see how they can synergize their efforts to achieve this objective of consolidating India's position as a reliable nation in the Committee of Nations. So this is the one. Right. So let me give you some more examples of what is happening. When it comes to evacuation of the stranded people, which is the most recent example I told you initially about how people are being rescued from Ukraine. It's not easy. The fact that our own defense attaches have been in touch with their counterparts when they're posted as part of the embassy, already there is a equation that is established. One phone call away, I'll be able to talk to my counterpart who is perhaps a naval officer or an air force officer. And immediately you find that there is a safe corridor that's established. They are even willing to suspend operations for 3-4 hours because of the friendship that you have nurtured, because of the fact that you helped them out in the past. So this is where it's important for us to know that it is not when there is there is panic that you start thinking about diplomacy. These are done continuously for years on end by taking into account the geopolitical, geostrategic environment and looking at the developments that are there, and to ensure that you are in a position to consolidate your efficacy of the well-oiled system, whether it is from the military or whether it is from the diplomatic corps or from your representatives. Please remember, though it's not part of my talk today, the diaspora, they play a major role, and the diaspora complement your efforts in many cases. Remember that this time the many of the diaspora who were in Romania and Poland opened up their langars and said, come and have food here. Let us shelter you in our gurudwaras. Let's put you up in our churches. So this is what happens because not because they suddenly start liking India. It's because of what you've done. It is your action that speaks words. What you've done in the past. What are the occasions when India rose in terms of providing humanitarian aid, in terms of using its defense forces? Remember, every time when we have gone out, it's because we do not have that kind of speed on other ships. I'm talking about the merchant ships and coast guard ships. The warships are the first responders. The aircraft that I spoke about, the P8I, is the first responder today in any crisis, whether it's tsunami, whether it is sinking of a ship, whether it's a fisherman, whether it is an action along the LAC. It is the P8I, which is based on a Boeing airframe, which is the first responder. So it is not specifically aimed at a military situation because peacetime tasks are 24/7, 365 days. War and hostilities happen at times, though we have to wait for it. So whether it is the defense attaché, how does the system work or the structure work? You have the embassy, you have the defense component in forms of defense attaches. You have the IB wings, the intelligence bureau. They have their own people, basically to find out what it is there. So you have an architecture that's looking at a situation evolving in the host country. It includes the type of engagements with other nations from that country. Aspiration all on almost on a daily basis. So this is all about spotting opportunity. So if you think that there is a dialogue that's going on for solar energy in one of the neighboring countries, immediately everybody comes together and says, here is what we can do for you. So if there is a when you are using your defense satellites or the naval forces, the army and air force for providing aid to civil power, the confidence of the countries to send their people to be trained here comes up. It becomes a revenue earner. It is not that we charge them a bomb, but it also provides. We should not look at the money that is generated because of training A or B or C. It should more be to look at what kind of bridges have been built between us and the nation that we want to have relations with. This is where, so defense diplomacy, plays a major role in spotting opportunities, working for it, and improving our worth. So this is a continuous exercise, and you do not achieve that kind of a capacity and capability in defense diplomacy unless you work for decades. And we've done that since our independence. It's not today that we are working for this. It is our own peacekeeping forces, whether it is the search and rescue effort that we sent to many of the neighboring nations in times of distress, or even during the situation like the op cactus that I mentioned, you find that we've done phenomenally well in terms of using defense assets and our prowess to further national objectives through what you can loosely term as defense diplomacy. So that's important to understand that it is so important. So I thought I'll just give you this kind of a thing because it's always with questions that we are able to engage with the students, and because there are some very basic questions at times, and there are some very complex ideas that may be forming in their minds. So it's always better to give a chance for your ideas to flourish with these interactive sessions. So with your permission, Professor Gaur, I will open the floor for questions, and they can be routed as may be necessary. And I'll use that opportunity to cover areas which I may not have covered.
Thank you, sir. You have already explained everything very exhaustively, and there is nothing left to clarify. But students have an inquiring mind. They are young generation students, and they try to know as much as possible. So now I ask the participant to please put your questions with your introduction. Come on.
Yes, I have a question. Good evening, sir. My name is Yashvi, and I'm a final year BA student from St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. So firstly, thank you for this address on defense diplomacy. So my question to you is mainly about maritime diplomacy or maritime in the maritime domain. So given that you spoke about increased Chinese maritime investments in South Asia, how do you see, we are just seeing that these investments made by China are increasing, and these will increase in the near future, and this will turn out to be a major maritime security threat for India. So I would like you to answer that. And my second part is that how do you see India's relationship with the Southeast Asian nations, because even these nations face a similar maritime aggression by China in the South China Sea. So how do you see these two countries cooperating to ensure the security of the maritime security of the region?
Thank you very much. I think it's a very interesting question, and because it also opens up the avenues for me to explore a little more on some of the areas that I have not covered. As far as the investments of China, like I told you, China has a lot more ability to dig deep into its pockets, which is why it's been able to invest in Bangladesh, in Myanmar, in Sri Lanka, everywhere. But unfortunately, every country where it has invested has realized that there is a trap, what we routinely call as a debt trap. So because of the debt trap, Sri Lanka was even compelled to give away a complete port of Hambantota for 99 years on lease. Which nation would like to give away a portion of its land just because it was unable to pay back a certain loan? So China was not condescending. And even in some of the African countries, the same thing has happened. Now, Pakistan itself, said, I'm not in a position to pay your loan this time. But because of the strategic interest, it is able to manipulate its excess money that it has for buying constituents. That's not just trying. But it does not work all the time. We realized, recently when Sri Lanka was under duress, it is India again which bailed them out with a certain amount of line of credit. So slowly but steadily, countries around us are realizing that no, China has not a benign investor. China is also learning, so it may change its ways. So what can India do? We cannot do it alone. No, I clearly said that, if we are a economy of $3 trillion, struggling $3 trillion, trying to make it 5 trillion. China is already a $20 trillion economy. So that It's becoming 20 trillion. Right now, it's 15 trillion. America is at 20. So how do you compete with somebody who's there? You cannot do it alone. Please go back to the principles of foundation of Quad. Why did Quad come about? Because even America, with all the force levels that it has, cannot contain China because of various other factors which I'm not discussing today. It could be the A280, it could be the forward line of defense, it could be the islands which have been converted into air bases, and its science and technology which has been used for getting new weapons, submarines, etc. So now that is the way to go. That is, in Quad, you are looking at US, Japan, Australia, India working together to provide those options which you cannot provide on your own. There's vaccine diplomacy or Blue Dot Network. The Blue Dot Network again is talking about creating pool of funds. Please remember, China has created the famous Asia Infrastructure Bond, in addition to the regular direct thing through the BRI funds or the Maritime Silk Route funds. So unless you can do together, you will not be able to match China. This is the harsh reality. So therefore, if you remember, there's another thing which people kept on talking about, which is the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, which is supposed to be an exclusive India-Japan initiative, which should help the needy in Asia and Africa. How much has it progressed? Zilch. It's still at some kind of a policy level. So unless you are in a position to put money where your mouth is, these initiatives which so-called counters to Chinese investments is not going to work out. So that's the point that we have. So how do we overcome this? Are we going to give up? No. Which is where we are looking at providing, remember, unfortunately, due to Pakistan holding SAARC to hostage, we were not able to provide the services to everybody. In the SAARC summit, India wanted to offer the satellite services to all the SAARC countries in South Asia. Did it happen? Some of the countries, of course, bilaterally were able to get the data for town planning, for measuring green cover, and for various other things. But Pakistan became a stumble block. So India will have to develop its efforts to gain the confidence of its neighbors. Which also brings me to the question that you had on Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is a bloc in ASEAN, has definitely not been able to work as a group, the ASEAN. China tries to deal with each of them bilaterally. The ASEAN now, all of them also are trying to move out of the embrace of China. Philippines even went to the Permanent Court of Arbitration in Hague, as you are aware, and where China hasn't cared about the kind of PCA directives which again. So coming back to your point, how do we engage with the Southeast Asia? I think our relations are improving with Vietnam. You saw that we are selling our BrahMos to Philippines. It's a major deal of some $240 billion. So this will give confidence to others in Southeast Asia, notably Vietnam, because even before Philippines was started thinking about the BrahMos, Vietnam was always there trying to say we need more ones. So we have been training their submarine crew on the Kilo class. We provided them military training. Their people have been coming here for training in our Indian Naval Academy. We also engage them in our different courses. Please remember, at different levels, they are looking at the basic level, at the Defense Services Staff College where the majors are trained. Again, we have foreign representation. This again is defense diplomacy. Then we have them at the Naval War College, the College of Air Warfare, and the College of Combat. Then at the very senior levels, I must tell you that the NDC, the National Defense College, where they are trained, Australia makes it a point to retain the person who has undergone a course as a defense attaché. You see the kind of leverage it provides Australia. The concerned officer has already worked with the complete team, the National Defense Course, and he is now in a position to take the best out of this association to his country. Many of the things that have happened between India and Australia is also because of this kind of a both formal and informal interaction. So the summary, the conclusion is very simple. We have a long way in ensuring that our defense diplomacy works. And defense diplomacy cannot work on our own. It requires a lot of money. We cannot provide that money on your own. You require separate pools or resources. Let the Quad create a fund, which is why I mentioned the Blue Dot Network. The Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, instead of just India and Japan trying to struggle, get more partners from the European Union. France and Germany are major economies there. Germany's economy is flourishing. So you need to be able to convince them to bring their money, put it here, so that there is an effective counter to what China is trying to do. And slowly it is nibbling away at the influences that other democratic countries have around the world.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Yes. Next question.
Good evening, sir. My name is Pranjal and I am doing a master's in IR from Jawaharlal Nehru University. So my question is, with changing geopolitical architecture, there has been insights that the Indo-Pacific will be the new battleground for the dominant and emerging powers in the future. And if we look at the India's engagement with this region, we have seen that India emerges as the net security provider with SADR cooperation with most of the countries in the Indo-Pacific. So apart from this, what can be the new areas of cooperation where India can utilize its defense diplomacy in the Indo-Pacific, considering China's increasing presence in this region?
Okay. Now, as far as India-Pacific is concerned, that's become the flavor of the analysts around the world. It's become also an area where people are trying to find out what purposes it will serve. There are both negative and positive dimensions of what Quad can do or what Quad cannot do. I have been convinced from day one, from the time this was mooted, that we should stop looking at what Quad cannot do. We should stop looking at, continuously saying it's not a military alliance. We should look at what it can do. What is the potential? What can be expanded in the scope of this joint work that we are trying to do? So, which is where I'm very happy to see that they are looking at vaccine diplomacy because of the compulsions of COVID. They are looking at technology exchanges. So, I will go to the extent of saying that since Quad is an active composition of 4 countries in Indo-Pacific, make the benefits of these initiatives to the countries in that neighborhood. That's the only way that it can earn the goodwill. So whatever is coming out of this, the technology transfer, don't limit it to just these 4 partners. Try and share it with the Southeast Asian countries, where China has a heavy influence because of the economic engagement. So the only way that the Quad can improve its footprint in the Indo-Pacific is by expanding its range of activities in multi-dimensional aspects of ocean governance, ocean security, prosperity, stability, and whatever else you want to call in harnessing the oceans. Because the premise that we are talking about is that the oceans are common heritage of mankind, which is where also the concept that is talked about in Indo-Pacific is you need to ensure rule-based order, which is not happening. And also, which is where we are looking at the free and open Indo-Pacific. What exactly does that mean? Free and open Indo-Pacific means that in this area, which is so defined, it doesn't matter if it's 100 miles or 10,000 miles in area. In that area, do all the maritime nations have a right to harness the oceans? Do they have a authority for unimpeded movement of goods, trade traffic, and supply and people movement? Do they have the unfettered access to fishing areas? So these are some of the things that will dictate on the very concept of free and open Indo-Pacific. And when you bring in a term like rule-based order, everybody knows who is flouting the order. The question is, what has been done about the violator? Nothing much. Hasn't China got away even after all those prescriptions by the Permanent Court of Arbitration? So it is on paper. The so-called compliance on the UNCLOS, the United Nations Conventions of the Laws of the Seas, has been on paper because there are violators. And the violators seem to have justification. So unless this is resolved, how do you resolve this? If China has already got possession of those islands, how can you take it back? Not by issuing an order in Hague, but by having a capability to take it back by force. By no other means can Philippines take back its areas. So, but no war, none of them want war, which suits the objective, the narrative of China. It does not want war because they clearly said that Sun Tzu has said the art of winning war is by not firing a bullet, or something to that effect. So therefore, now we need to deal with this adversary at many planes. We need to be able to look at his agenda, look at his plans for the next 20, 30 years, and see how you can counter it by engaging with the people who are not friendly to China. Vietnam is not friendly to China. Philippines is not. Philippines, Vietnam, Bangladesh, they all have their own issues. It's not that everybody is happy with the engagement, but because of the economic compulsions, they're doing business with them. China knows this too, just as we do. So, but it will perhaps not cross the Lakshman Rekha. The maritime militia that it uses in the Indo-Pacific does not allow fishermen from Philippines to fish in its own exclusive economic zone because China claims it. Same is the case with Vietnam. So the international so-called rule-based order has failed. So what you will need to perhaps do is to deal with that at multiple levels, at the economic level, at the diplomatic level, at the political level. There are also lessons from Ukraine. Everybody tells you that, Ukraine, Russia would not have attacked it if Ukraine had retained its warheads. That's a different story altogether. What I'm saying is the nations who are around us, just as we are equipping Philippines, maybe there is a need for us to equip others with military hardware that they request. So that there are multiple options which are there. Not that all of them will succeed, but you should not be found wanting in trying them and giving them a chance to succeed. Or else we can as well walk out and say, China, you take over India, you take over everybody else, and we'll be subservient. Because that's what they want as a middle kingdom.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, please. Next question.
Good evening, sir. First of all, thank you for such insightful session. I'm Anushka. I'm a final year mass media student from Jai Hind College, Mumbai. My question to you is, so in case of nuclear warfare, China was one of the first nations to propose a no first use policy. But in recent times, we are seeing that China has got very aggressive in its strategy. So how do you think that how much are we prepared for such aggression in the near future, or in times of such uncertainty? Thank you.
Thank you, Anushka. It's very clear as to why both China and India still believe in the policy of no first use. It's based on the ability of the nations for providing deterrence. In our case, sea-based deterrence through Arihant and Arigat, which are the SSBNs. The moment you have a nuclear ballistic missile capable submarine, the whole equation changes. Because even after a first mad nuclear strike, whoever is launched it cannot escape another attack from the sea, which is where both China have maintained that we will not be the first to use it. But if you dare to use a nuclear weapon, the retaliation will be swift and severe, and it will come from multiple platforms. The surviving land platforms as well as from the sea, because it is a sea-based platform that gives you that kind of an advantage because it's submerged somewhere, it's within the missile strike range. So the spotting of the nuclear submarine is different. They can remain underwater for months. So that is what changes the equation. So China will not be foolhardy, irrespective of the, remember, the nuclear bluff was called during the Kargil war. Everybody thought that, in case the Kargil war spills over a little more, Pakistan could start using the tactical nuclear weapons or it can go nuclear. It did not happen. Why? It is because of the fear of retaliation, a swift and hard retaliation that would come from the sea. So I do not think that the threshold of nuclear engagement or a conventional engagement would move on to the nuclear threshold in the case of both India and China. will require some mad people sitting there to use nuclear power. The whole idea is to contain the envelope of conventional engagement. So apparently today, China has already got over 700 nuclear warheads. It will continue to use it for negotiations. It will use it as an instrument of deterrence and to perhaps provide a little more meat while it's negotiating with tough opponents. Anyway, the number of people who are, tough today is coming down after what you saw happening in Russia-Ukraine case, when both NATO and US have virtually abandoned Ukraine. Not that Ukraine was a member of NATO, but the point is that there is no stomach for such engagements anymore after the failure of USA in multiple theaters, in multiple scenarios. So the purpose that it will serve today, remember, even during the Ukraine-Russian war, Putin said, "I'm putting my nuclear forces on standby." This was more a threat to contain the expanding envelope of conventional war. The moment that was said, Western NATO said, "We are not going to position, we're not going to provide troops, we're not going to be on the ground, there'll be no boots on ground, etc." So what it has done is to control the specter of nuclear fear by having this side of capability. In the case of Pakistan, it does not have the second strike capability still, though there are efforts which are ongoing. But remember, that country does not have strategic depth. A size which is only 1/3 of India, and with hardly any diversion of its force assets, whether it's nuclear or otherwise, is susceptible to greater damage while it's trying to contain the spread of nuclear war if it happens. So personally, let me assure you, based on what we have seen, that I do not think that there'll be a nuclear exchange between China and India. Conventionally, of course, there will be different forms of warfare that will be witnessed, including informatization warfare, hybrid warfare, and whatever else you want to call it by any other name. But I think you saw even in Russia, Ukraine, it is the media warfare, the social handles that are going to distort the entire picture, provide false information, shoot and scoot kind of information warfare that's taking place. Morphing of pictures to show something from Iraq as something that's happening here. All this will happen. So the complexity of the warfare will change. But coming back to the nuclear exchange, I do not think that there will be any nuclear exchange in the near future. You may suddenly find something saying that, like a nuclear reactor power plants which are taken over by Russia. That is a different kettle of fish. I'm not discussing that today. So I'm saying that there will be a total restraint in terms of using nuclear power as a means of war machinery.
Yes. Next question.
Can you just read that out? I just missed it. I came for a flash and went off. Something about territorial waters. You can feel free to ask me that question.
Good evening, sir. Let me read it for you. So the question is from Rakshanda Sidhu. Am I audible clearly?
Yeah, you're audible. Please go ahead.
The question is, if territorial sea, 12 nautical miles zone of two countries overlaps each other, then what would be the UN clause rule regarding this for both the countries?
Yeah, okay. The UNCLOS is quite clear. The classic example is, in the case of Sri Lanka, India, where we have the Parkway, and in some cases, the so-called exclusive economic zone, which can affect to 200 nautical miles, is not there. So if there is any such overlap, there's something called the Intermediate Meridian Line, Intermediate Maritime Borderline, IMBL. So by and large, it will be a median line, which will be agreed upon by both the countries by drawing that particular line, so that let's say you got only about 23 miles between India and Sri Lanka. So a line would be drawn depending the contours, depending on the location of islands, at about 11.5 miles. But it may include some features, it may not include some features. Remember the classic case of Kachativu. The Kachativu was ceded in 1974. So that is still a sore point, because till that delimitation took place, the fishermen from India were carrying their fishing activities in the historical waters. So with the Kachativu being ceded away in 1974, our fishermen lost their right to go there. But even today, our fishermen are poaching in Sri Lankan waters, which is unfortunately a legacy that came from that demarcation of an IBL, which did not take the historical factors into account. So there are no serious flaws in UNCLOS while you are trying to demarcate your boundaries with a neighboring country where there is overlapping exclusive economic zone or even a territorial sea. But in the case of Bangladesh, please remember that when the exclusive economic zones between India and Bangladesh were overlapping due to the nature of the rivers which flow. The river flows from closer to the other country, then you have more area. If the river line flows towards you more, he's got greater sea area as exclusive economic zone. In the case of this, so they went to the International Tribunal and they awarded the case in favor of Bangladesh. India was magnanimous. They said, fine, we honor and abide by the ruling given by the International Tribunal on the Law of the Seas. It did not happen in the case of China. So again, it's part of the confidence building in our neighborhood, where the neighbor knows here is a big, he's not acting like a big bully. There was a decision that was given by the tribunal and it's been honored. So UNCLOS has all the provisions, but it's the question of, are you willing to go by the decisions that were given even when it is not favorable? That is where your own credibility is demonstrated to the people around you. Now people now respect India because they said, oh, look, Bangladesh is a small neighbor, but they did not take out the exclusive economic zone by force. They agreed and they abide by the decision that was given by the authorities who went through the case and said, no, this area which is overlapping should go to Bangladesh. We gave it to them.
Yes, next question.
Good evening, sir. My name is Shreya and I'm currently pursuing my master's from Amity University in International Relations. And my question is, how can we counter Chinese dominance in the maritime diplomacy? Like in context, focusing more on the Indian.
I think you're muted.
Sir, should I repeat my question?
You just got muted for a short while. I think the last portion was not clearly audible.
So, okay, I'll repeat it once more. My question is, how can we counter the Chinese growing dominance in the maritime diplomacy? And how do Indian Navy take it as a challenge or not?
Okay. So as far as this question is concerned, some of it has been explained earlier in terms of the potential of China to use its money where it's required for furthering its economic and strategic objectives. So they found an instrument called the BRI, the Belt and Road Instrument. And the maritime segment is the Maritime Silk Road. So the money was made available for investment in the neighborhood of India. So your traditional relations that you had in the Indian Ocean region were affected because of this extra regional power, which came and made heavy investments in our neighborhood, changing the status quo of the region. Unless you have that kind of a money, you are not able to counter it, which is why I said you require pooling of resources. But China itself was guilty of not being intelligent enough to use this opportunity to build sound relations. What it has done is, it has angered everybody. It has angered Sri Lanka by taking away a portion of its land. It's angered an African country by making more profit. It's done so in Malaysia, where Mahathir, when he came, he canceled 2 of these projects and renegotiated them. So Chinese, now the belief is that you cannot trust a Chinese. So whatever he trusts has to will now go through a greater scrutiny. Whereas India has been magnanimous in reaching out to its neighbors, providing relief, investing them, etc., etc. But the only problem we had is that even when there is an intention, we were not all good in execution. The Chinese would come with a shipload of people. They would not provide any employment to the locals, and they were able to finish the task and go back. But the locals, there's a gradual resentment that grew because the local people were denied an opportunity, except for some menial tasks. They are not employed at all. So all these are factors which we need to use to our advantage by ensuring that you don't do the same thing that Chinese are doing. We don't have to copy them, because only superfluously it appears that they are a success. But when you go deep into the relations that it has with various countries, it is not a success story. It's only about money. So all these notions have realized that these relations will not test engagement on many fronts because of the style, because of the disparity that exists when they award contracts, because of the unilateral way in which they optimize and exploit local resources. All these are things that are not in favor of China. It's got a sound relation comes by having confidence in each other, or not by just being a money lender. A money lender can never be your partner.
Yes, next question.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. I'm Apriti Verma, and I'm also a final year's Master International Relations student. So I would just like to know that since through sea lines of communication or in the Indian Ocean region, almost 60% trade flows in and out. So I would like you to throw some light on how the disturbance and the Chinese emergence in the region affect and what should be India's maritime diplomacy towards it.
So as I also mentioned while explaining another phenomena, the UNCLOS allows all nations to harness the oceans. You can even sail within the territorial waters of another country, that is within 12 nautical miles, as long as it is a passage intended, it's called innocent passage. So allowed. So there are no problems whatsoever in 60% of, something like, I believe, 60,000 plus ships transit every year through the Malacca Straits, or through the Straits of Hormuz, or via the Good Hope. That's perfectly all right. There's nothing wrong in that, because India also would like to use the same sea lines of communications of promoting its trade, connectivity, and engagement with the nations, maritime nations, from east coast of Africa to Australia and beyond. So these are legitimate transactions. The sea lines of communications are meant for such legitimate transactions. So there are no concerns there. The only concern is when these sea lines of communication are used by warships frequently to change the character of the area in which you are operating. Take the piracy, anti-piracy operations by China. From 2008 onwards, there are 2 ships constantly kept on patrol. So in sheer numbers, something like 360 odd patrols have taken place since 2008, the last 12 years. So why are they there? Not just for anti-piracy. They would like to know what are the bathymetric conditions. What is the weather pattern? What is the traffic pattern? How can my submarines operate here? What are the factors that come in the way of operating my SSPNs? So this is the kind of data that they would like to get. Why? Even in the Cold War, the warm waters of Indian Ocean region were where the nuclear submarines operate, both from Russia and from USA. The Chinese submarines are trying to do likewise today. Many of them have been coming, but luckily for us, we have a credible platform like the P8I, and also what's called the Maritime Domain Awareness architecture, which is operating from close to Delhi, where we are getting all the information on which kind of platform is transiting in which place and for what purpose. So anyone who is not known, is not a known target, immediately you will set out an aircraft and investigate. In the case of underwater platforms, we have methods to track them. So we are not unduly worried about, because in terms of pure geography, China does not enjoy the kind of geographic advantage that India has. Not only do you have access to Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, we also have Andaman Nicobar, the only unified command, the Tri-Services Command. And that's at an average of 1200 to 1300 kilometers from mainland, whether it's from Chennai or Visakhapatnam or Bengal, West Bengal. So this is where we have credible response mechanism that is supported by a maritime domain awareness structure, which consists of radars, ships, submarines, drones. All these are used to build up a surface picture or a subsurface picture to, during peacetime, gather data on the pattern of operations, to collect data in terms of electronic natures of their propellers, of their radar emissions, of their sonar emissions, etc. And all this is something that will go into a database. They do likewise. It's not that only India will do it. When your aircraft or your ships are operating in the Pacific, your data will also be collected. What it does is, it allows you to have this data stored, made available in real time to any of our units which are operating. So he knows who's operating, and you know how to counter them. So I'm not unduly worried about the number of ships that pass in Indian Ocean region. Please remember, from South China Sea, if a warship from the Chinese fleet has to come to the African coast, it will take 10 days. It imposes heavy penalty on the machinery, on men, on material, because the weather and all that at sea is something which is phenomenal. You must see to understand this. So whereas we are not, affected in the manner that they're affected. We can operate from Bombay, you can operate from Karwar, you can operate from Cochin, you can operate from Visakhapatnam, you can operate from Chennai, you can operate from Port Blair. That luxury China does not have, which is why he wanted Hambantota, which is why he commissioned a military base in Djibouti, which is why he wants ports in Bangladesh, in Myanmar, which is why he was engaging deeply with Maldives till it came, it transited to a friendly government for India. So I'm not really worried about the number of ships which come here. Who do we worry about? We worry about their scientific research vessels which come there in our exclusive economic zones and gather data. We worry about the deep sea fishing vessels from Southeast Asian countries which come and poach in our areas, because our fishermen are not going there. So they are dwindling the ocean wealth which belongs to you in your exclusive economic zone. Those are issues of concern. Within the Indo-Pacific, you know that their own fishing vessels are supported by the military militia. That is, the Coast Guard ships are mercenaries who are engaged in armed ships which go in protection of their own fishing vessels. This is inhuman. We don't do this, which is where we are talking. I know earlier on I spoke about the aspect of credibility of a nation as a responsible nation that conforms to the rule-based order. It's not happening. So Indian Navy is well equipped, blessed with geography, blessed with our own indigenous vessels now, and a very sound surveillance architecture which operates from Gurgaon. So I'm not unduly honestly concerned. That in fact I was asked earlier in another forum, said, no, they come up to Hambantota, does it not affect your equation? Please remember, Hambantota is within the striking range of missiles of all three services of India. You can fire from Kanyakumari, you can fire from Tanjavur, you can fire from Madurai, you can fire both from Army, Navy and Air Force. It can be neutralized in no time if it becomes a military facility. So Yes, you should not overestimate the capability of your adversary, nor should you underestimate his capability. So you must look at all these factors and have your contingency plans for dealing with a situation that can emerge in during hostilities or during peace.
Yes. The last question.
Good evening, sir. My name is Dipanita. I'm doing my bachelor's in international relations. My question to you is, how does India's defense diplomacy and its engagement with China affect the relationship with the West?
And no, we did not discriminate between China and Russia and America. In fact, we did carry out some exercises with China, if you recollect, including with the army. It is China's undoing of all these efforts to build, good bridges that has let us down. But for this LAC standoff, which started in Galwan, there were even efforts to work together with Russia, with China, send our forces there, have exchanges, have military domain. Even our ships have participated with them earlier. So I would look at it as a loss for China. They lost their face. The credibility is gone. So as far as pure defense diplomacy with China is concerned, it's pointless. In its case, it's a standoff. The standoff has not been resolved even after 14 talks with their counterparts along the border. Our borders have been not resolved after 23 rounds of talks, since 1962. So, it is China is untrustworthy. And they're not going to change their character because they feel that they are the Middle Kingdom. They will not compromise. So, but there will be a lot of statements which are given, Panchasheel. All this, if you look at those statements, you will think that it is the most law-abiding nation in the world. But they flout everything that they talk. They say something, they do something else. So I do not see much of defense diplomacy succeeding when it comes to China. It's perhaps only a military engagement like in 1962 or in subsequent cases where we also gave them a bloody nose, or like Vietnam in 1979, which taught them a lesson. That will put them back. But diplomacy working with them, we work very hard. Let me tell you, based on the first-hand account, we work very hard to iron out the differences, but they don't budge an inch when it comes to negotiations. So how do you deal with them? It cannot be a one-way traffic. It can't say, my way or highway. That's been the approach of China. And that's something that is not conducive for military diplomacy. They're not giving up. We continue to talk to them. 14th rounds are gone, 15th will happen, 16th will happen. But what have we issued at the end? We keep talking all right. But what has happened? What are the results that you have to show? So there are serious concerns in using defense diplomacy as a tool for increasing confidence. The confidence in building measures are affected due to the transience of an adversary who is untrustworthy. So I don't think that we can proceed much in terms of making this a tool for building the bridges with such nations who flout international norms.
So, sir, with that, with your permission, we close this question answer session. And before that, I would like to express my gratitude to you for having addressed this forum and satisfied, inquiring minds, the young generation inquiring minds about defense diplomacy and all that. And really, it was wonderful experience for our students who can have a live interaction with distinguished guests like you. And thank you very much. And with your permission, I close this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jai Hind. It was a great opportunity for me to talk to the youngsters. I wish them all good luck in their pursuit of knowledge, because knowledge is power and they know it. All the best. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.